So, hello and welcome, everybody. I'd like to say a huge welcome to everybody who's just been joining in the last few minutes as I've been letting you in, as I've been nattering away. Really good to have so many of you join me today for this session. I hope you find it helpful. I hope you find it useful, and it will help sort of clarify some of the most common questions I get asked. I'm going to kind of talk through my objectives, what we're kind of trying to cover in today's session in a moment. I'm just going to check to see if there's anything. Most people are here now. So I'm going to make a start. I'm just reading through the messages in the chat because they're coming thick and fast on where you're at. My question to you guys was where you're at in your exams journey, and what stage you're at in terms of, have you taken exams? Are you looking to take exams? Several of at quite varied stages. Some of you planning in the next couple of years to take exams, some of you starting today or starting imminently, sort of in September. So quite a kind of range there. And just kind of looking through. So Karen, hello Karen. Some iGCSE's done English language prep from September 27. Leanne has an 11-year-old, and you started your homework journey in September. Congratulations. I'm glad to hear it's going well. Maths next year and English in the next couple of years. I think that sounds like a good plan. Daughter's 14, taking her first GCSE this year, halfway through two others, exams next year, starting more in September. So staggering them, that sounds a good plan too. Right, so Akatil, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Starting iGCSEs found the edXL format not right for my son. Hoping that yeah, I'm a big fan of Cambridge. So I'm aware, reading through the chat, that I did ask if people have watched any of my other webinars or listened to. I've done some podcasts with Home Education Matters. So I don't know if you've come across those. So those will actually be helpful for those of you who are new to home education, actually, because I realized reading through the comments that there's quite a few of you who are new to home education. So I've done webinars on where do I start with exams? How do we go about it? Because I had so many people over the years asking me when to take exams, how to take exams, how you go about taking it. It's very daunting. And I know that as a parent, even as a qualified teacher, the weight of that responsibility can feel a bit sort of overwhelming, especially when there's such a kind of wealth of information out there. It's hard to navigate that sometimes and hard to know which direction to go in. So I have done webinars on taking exams. I've done ones on studying English. So this today's session is not specifically focused on sort of advice regarding which specification to take, and Cambridge versus EdXL. So several of you commenting on that in there. So I will signpost those videos because I think you'll find that they'll be of help to some of you who are at different stages. But I want to keep today's focus kind of, I'll be talking through that in a moment, more closely kind of tied to three areas really: what I do, what courses are available, the specification changes to the syllabus that are coming up, because I know there's some confusion around that. So it's basically mainly sort of trying to demystify the spec changes and introducing what I do and the different options available and how to kind of navigate the courses available depending on your preferences and requirements, and just to take questions and help you really. So Ruth said, I watched a recording of the last one I did about so that was a while ago, the Cambridge GCSE. So I haven't done any for a couple of years, but they're there in the Facebook groups. Do have a look through, because some of them are, I hope, well, people tell me they found them very helpful. So that's the point of them, right? Hello, Lorraine. Your daughter does my Key Stage 3 classes. That's lovely. And you just put the iGCSE as well. Lovely. So I'm going to be talking through that and the approach I'm taking for that. NK attended a webinar a few years ago. Yeah, I've been around for a while now. Yes, so Claudia says Cambridge is the most accessible for her son who's dyslexic, and I think that it does cater to the whole range. So the students who aiming for the 9s and the A stars, there's opportunities for that. And for those who find English more challenging for a whole range of different reasons, I think it's much more transparent, straightforward, and it's easier to kind of get your head around, I think, for students. And obviously it doesn't have the anthology element. And Joe says, my eldest did GCSE English in school, benefited from a syllabus that had no anthology, it was set texts, was also doing English literature. So yep, looking for something similar. And I think Cambridge is your best bet for that. So quite a few of you having sort of, facing challenges, ADHD, autism, dyslexia. So I think Cambridge is a good option there, worth exploring. Yeah, just reading through. Yeah, leaving English to later is a good is good. It's a good approach, to be honest, because I feel that English, unlike a lot of other subjects, is skills based. So it takes time to build those skills. It takes time to read and build vocabulary and build understanding, build exposure to different kinds of writing. And it's not something you can just cram in 6 months or a year, as you can for maybe science-based subjects. So I think it's a good idea to sort of, and also it benefits from, students benefit from the kind of greater maturity that comes with learning more about the world, discovering their own writing style and voice, and sort of incorporating their, drawing on rich kind of varied experiences that can help, as a kind of basis for creative writing, and, just sort of developing that maturity, knowledge, awareness, understanding. It all helps to leave English, I think, for most students. I'm not saying you can't do brilliantly, get an A* or 9 if you're 14, but I don't think it's one to be rushed for most students. And even my older two, who were both very strong in English, took English as amongst the last batch, so 15, 16. So, and I think that works well for most young people. And there's no rush. I think it's preferable to wait if you can. Okay, so I'm going to now change the chat. Thank you all for your contributions so far. I've got somebody in the waiting room. I hadn't noticed. I'll let her in. And I'm going to change the chat now, so you can only message me. So you can message me sort of directly, as opposed to just having the open group chat. That's just because sometimes messages popping up can be a bit distracting. And in some cases, people might want to sort of share something sort of more confidentially that they wouldn't want necessarily everybody to be in the group to read. So that's why I'm going to change the chat, so that way it doesn't interrupt the flow also, because I'm going to cover quite a lot of information. I'll warn you now in today's session, because there's quite a lot I wanted to get through as I was planning this and thinking about what I wanted to cover with you guys. There's quite a lot I'd like to kind of ground I'd like to cover with you. So a bit of housekeeping before, just boring bits before we get into the more interesting stuff, hopefully. So I asked if everybody could turn off cameras, just because I'm recording the session, and I'm going to be sharing the recording in the Facebook group. So don't worry about having to sort of take on board and digest everything that I'm going to be talking about. And because I've realized in the chat also, and I was conscious of this preparing as well, that people are at very different stages. Some of you new to home education, some of you kind of familiar with and having had experience already of the exam process. It's not all, some of it is going to be over the heads of some of you, and that's okay at this stage, because if you're new to it, I wouldn't expect you to sort of, don't be overwhelmed by the information. Okay, the information is there to benefit those of you who are at that stage and who can, for whom that information will be beneficial. And because I'm recording it, you can come back and revisit it and take your time to digest, make notes, and sort of take on board the information I'm going to be sharing with you, because it's quite a lot to take on board in one session. Okay, so I have got the Facebook groups. I think most of you have heard about this through the Facebook groups. Let me know if there are other channels that you've heard about. This is helpful for me to know where people hear about it. Technical problems, I'm not a technical expert. I've got used to working with Zoom over the years. I'm quite savvy with that, well, proficient to a degree. But technical problems, if you need to leave because you've got some technical problem, you can leave and rejoin, and I'll look out and I'll let you back in. And most technical problems I find are resolved like that. Sometimes you might be a bit far away from the router. You might want to rejoin and become, sort of move closer to the router in your house if the signal is intermittent or disrupted. And if you want to change, I think most people have got their actual names. Um, some people haven't. I've noticed as looking through the list of participants. If you want to change your name, you can do that quite easily. Go to the three little dots in the top right-hand corner of your image and scroll down to like the very bottom. And it's rename. You can rename yourself. Then I know who I'm talking to rather than somebody's phone or iPad. And that's always quite nice for me to actually be able to put name to people. Last point I already mentioned for the benefit of latecomers who've just joined. Feel free, because the chat is set so you can only message me, you can message me directly. Feel free to post questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, anything you like. It's quite a relaxed, informal conversation we're having here. So if you want to share any questions or concerns that you have in the chat with me, please feel free to do so. I would welcome you doing that, encourage you to do that. And I will try my very best. I'll endeavour to cover all the questions. There's a lot of comments that I've got through just now. I'll try to cover everybody's questions as at appropriate points during the session. And I'm also hopefully going to have a Q&A session at the end. I mean, I've scheduled this, by the way, guys, for an hour from 2 to 3, but I suspect, as is often the case with these things, it may be a little longer. But if you need to leave before that point, it's okay. I'll be sharing the recording in the group after the session later today, most likely. Okay, right. So I asked earlier on if any of you, and there's a mixture of responses to the question I asked, which was how many of you have watched any of the recordings I've done or listened to any of the podcasts I've done with Home Education Matters with Eleanor, or some of you are current students at doing my Key Stage 3 classes. Some of you have attended webinars in the past, which is lovely, so some familiar faces. But I thought it might be helpful to give you a bit of background about me. Sorry for the people who already know me, some of you know me in real life as well, about me, just to kind of recap so you know what my background is, what my experience is, and to signpost a couple of things that might be helpful to you as well. So I realized when I updated the slides from a previous set that I'd done in this profile thing about me, this bio thing, that I'd put in there previously, a home educating mum of 17 years, and now it's 21. Oh my goodness, 21 years. So my eldest daughter just turned 23. So it's not quite 21 years, but I guess, preschool, right? So, and I've got 3 children. They were always home educated. 2 have graduated home education. The eldest literally graduated from university last year. Yay! Cute proud mum moment, and I was very proud of her because she got a first-class degree in psychological and behavioral science from LSE. So she was home ed up to A level. It doesn't say there. But she decided she wanted to be home ed for A level as well. So she was home ed all the way through up to A level, and it can be done, and you can live to tell the tale, guys. And my middle daughter is she's finished her first year at uni. She opted to go to college for her A levels, but she was home ed up to 16, so did all her GCSEs and iGCSEs with me. And then she did her A levels at a selective sixth form, where being home ed didn't create any barriers at all. And then she's now studying a degree in psychology with education at UCL. And my youngest daughter just turned 14. My baby's now 14 in June. So she's going to stay, she's been home ed forever, and she's also going to stay home ed for another couple of years. We've been working on GCSEs, like several of you, GCSEs and iGCSEs over the last couple of years. She's doing a couple more next year, and she'll be doing a couple more after that. And generally, with all 3 of mine, we've done sort of 2 a year, staggered over 4 years, to have a total of 8, which you don't need to have as many as that, but we decided to do that. And most colleges, sixth forms will take 6, 5 to 6, A to C grades. But check with your local college if you're thinking about for your young person to go to college to do their A levels or further study. Right. I'm also a qualified teacher and a tutor of several years. I've been tutoring online for many years now. I have a master's degree in English language and literature, and I'm a qualified teacher. Back in the day, decades ago, I qualified. And so I've got sort of years and years of experience supporting my own children, who I supported with all their GCSEs, And I've also, in the last few years, been tutoring online, home educated, and some school children. I've got children all around the country studying with me and all around the world. And I realized the other day that I have approximately about 400 students a year, which was lovely. It's lovely to be able to support so many students and to help them in their learning journey and to sort of get that qualification under their belt so they can go on to do amazing things. So I specialize in Cambridge, the Cambridge iGCSE English language syllabus. That's the only syllabus I teach, and I support students from 11 through to 16. I run 2 Facebook groups I think most of you are familiar with, because that's where I think you've heard about this webinar, but some of you I think are in one group but not the other. So you might want to join both if you're only in one, because there is different information. So in the general exams information and advice group, I've also got information about studying the sciences. I'm going to do some stuff on maths because I think we're coming up to that again with my third daughter now. And sort of general advice about exams, choosing between Cambridge versus edXL, for example, for the sciences, lots of resources. And for the Cambridge English Lang and advice and support group, it's more tailored to the what it says. It's what it says on the tin. So it's sort of Cambridge iGCSE English language, and there's advice, hints and tips, exam tips, and so on. And so over the years, I mentioned earlier on that I've done various podcasts and webinars, which some of you might find helpful, looking at studying English, taking exams. I've done a revision and exams preparation webinar, and I've done exam clinics as well, sort of helping students troubleshoot with exam responses. So that's just a bit of background about me. Today's session isn't primarily about me, though. That's just to give you sort of, for those of you who don't know me, a bit of information about where I'm coming from and what my experiences are. And so what I wanted to do, first of all, was just kind of, let me just put this up there. This is what we're doing today. So the objectives, if you like, for today's session are threefold. The first thing we're going to be doing is I'm going to give you sort of an overview, a guide to the syllabus, what the key reading and writing objectives are, what the key assessment tasks are in the exam, how the skills are assessed, and what examiners are looking for. That's the first part of the session. The middle part is in response to many questions I've had regarding the courses I offer, and how to sort of pick the right course for you depending on your preferences for levels of support, timescale, and format. And this is sort of just to help with sort of working out, because I get a lot of emails and messages on Messenger asking what courses I offer, and specifically people getting in touch to say, oh, my son or daughter is at this stage, what course would you recommend? So this is sort of like to help you work out which courses might be a good option for you. And specifically because of the spec change that's being introduced, there's a little bit of additional confusion sometimes people have regarding when those changes are being introduced, what the changes mean, and how to kind of, work with that, and how significant they are as well. So that's the last part of today's session, is focusing on demystifying the changes to the specification, and basically talking you through what changes are being introduced and what they mean for students. And spoiler alert here, there aren't any major changes. So breathe a sigh of relief, everyone, because the main sort of skills that are being assessed are the same, and the tasks are broadly the same. What they have done is tweak things slightly, the wording, the mark weighting, and some of the details which don't significantly alter the assessment tasks. And where there are some changes, I think it's beneficial for students. So I had somebody message me a couple of days ago saying they were undecided about whether to go for 26 or 27, whether to do the exams next year, which should fall under the current specification, or whether to wait till 2027. And her daughter had some challenges and found English a bit of a struggle. So in that case, if that's you, I would recommend, I mean, if that applies to your young person, I would recommend waiting for 2027. Because it will give you more time, okay, and time can help, as for the reasons I mentioned earlier, especially if English is a struggle. It gives you more time to sort of pace yourself and build skills and practice. And secondly, the spec changes, although relatively minor, I think do favor the student. Okay, so there are some specific advantages, I think, although, as I said, there's not a huge amount of difference. It's not a major overhaul. They're not radically altering anything. There's some minor changes they're making, but they do, I think, benefit students. So if that's something I wanted to get out there, because I realized in the comments, when I had the comments earlier on, that quite a few of you have young people who have, for various reasons, find English challenging. So I think if that applies to you, then waiting is preferable, and there isn't any rush. Okay, so I think that's important to stress. And then last part, hopefully we'll be able to build in a bit of a Q&A discussion, recap, and have some final thoughts, and just sort of go over some the key points that we've made. So I've done a lot of talking, so please do let me know in the chat if there's anybody if anybody has any questions, do let me know. Because it's helpful to feel like I'm talking with you, to you, rather than at you. Okay, so right, going to start first of all with the Cambridge Assessment Overview. So some of you have maybe looked at the syllabus. Have any of you looked at the syllabus? Are you familiar with it? If you're not, that's okay. Hopefully this will help. And if you have looked at it, it will sort of provide a handy review and recap on maybe and reinforce what you already know. So all candidates take two options. So the way it's assessed is students sit paper one and either paper two or component three, which is the coursework option. Now, in practice, what that means is because coursework is more difficult, I won't say impossible, but more difficult to access for home educated young people, in practice, most home ed families take paper one and paper two. My older two did, my youngest will, most of my students do. The coursework component is quite difficult to facilitate. There's very few centres who will do that. You have to pay extra for it. So if you think coursework might be an option, it might be worth investigating that. But for most people, it will be paper one and paper two are the options that they'll be taking. Now, one of the questions I get asked quite often is regarding the specification codes. So in this country, in the UK, you can take either the 0500 or the 0990 specifications. They are identical, except for the fact that the 0500 awards grades A star to G, and the 9 to 1 is only available in the UK. If you think about it, the fact that you've got 9 to 1 grades, you've got more grades than A to G, means that you need to attain a higher percentage of marks in order to get a 9 as opposed to an A star. Does that make sense, everyone? So if you're aiming for a top grade, you'll need to score a high number of marks across both papers to get a 9 as opposed to an A star. Now, if you're aiming for that might not be an issue for you, but it's something worth pointing out. Other than that, the tasks are exactly the same. The papers are exactly the same. They're set on the same day at the same time. There is no difference. And the other thing to mention is the A to G 0500 spec that's what most students abroad will take. That's globally. Whereas in this country, because they introduced the 9 to 1 grading system a few years ago, we now have that option as well. And it's up to you which you prefer. There is no difference. So my daughters preferred letter grade. So we were sort of just in the first year or two, I think, of the changeover to the 9 to 1 system. They like letters, not numbers. So they just went for the 0500, even though they got marks, which would have got them 9s anyway. But they like letters. I like letters too, I think. But 9 to 1 is absolutely fine. The reason why I mention that is because it didn't pose a barrier. Remember I said my middle daughter went to the selective sixth form? They didn't say, oh, look, you've got the 0500, you've got a letter grade A star, not a number. It didn't pose an issue at all, because sometimes people are a bit concerned about that. So I think it's worth mentioning that. Component 4, this is another question I get asked often. I'm just looking at a question. Let me see. So there's no difference A star to G or 9 to 1 for a student who might be desperately hoping to scrape the grade 4 that he needs to get into college. Exactly right, Joe. So if you are just wanting to get to pass, I would go for the 0500 because it would be easier to get a C. Okay, it would be easier to get a C than a 4. I don't remember exactly what the boundaries are for the 4 grade, but no, I know that it's easier to get that. So I would suggest you go for the 0500. Okay, that's fine, Emily, no problem. You have a burning question about the spec change. Um, my son has done 3 I/GCSEs already and sitting another in November. So far, it has been really vital for him to have lots of past paper practice, like 40 if they're available. There weren't enough for him for statistics, and that was an issue. That's partly understanding wording of questions, ironing out silly mistakes, but also about really getting to grips with the mark scheme and what's being looked for. Exactly that. Will all old spec papers be valuable with the spec change for practice? And will there be a clear understanding of new mark scheme available / sample papers, etc.? Right. I don't know. Have you signed up to one of my courses or not? No pressure if you haven't. I was just going to say that I have actually gone through and modified all the past paper tasks that I include. Oh, you're doing so. Excellent. So the reason why I mentioned that is because all the past paper tasks that I provide with the course, I have modified the wording and the mark weighting so it matches the new spec for the new spec version of the course that I'm doing, that I've just launched. So you don't need to worry about that. So there'll be 10 past paper assignments, which will all be in line with the new spec. And even if you want even more papers to practice with, in the exam prep course, which comes with the complete course, that set of exam prep course recordings, there are past paper tasks which I will also be amending so that they're in line with the new spec. Does that make sense? So you'll have an additional 10 there. And the other thing I was going to say is that remember I said that the changes are minor. So the old spec papers will still be valuable because the tasks, the skills being assessed will be the same. Okay, so they'll be useful for additional practice. So I hope that answers your question. I hope that reassures you. Okay, so let's go back to we're talking about the components. Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Emily. I'm glad that helped. Right, so you take paper 1, you take paper 2, component 3, which is coursework, not really an option for most people. And then component 4 is something I get asked a lot about, is the speaking and listening. So the official title of this syllabus is oral endorsement. It's got oral endorsement in it. And that throws people because they think you need to do this oral. And the thing to point out here is that the oral component is optional. It's separately endorsed. It doesn't contribute to a candidate's overall grade. So you can just opt out of it and it won't make any difference. It's mainly for kids in schools so that they can do the speaking and listening, but it doesn't add anything to your grade. It doesn't mean you can't get a certain grade. Does that make sense, everyone? Because that's something that people ask me a lot about, especially when it comes to booking exams, because they get thrown by the name of the specification and get a bit worried that, what the implications of that. Right. So now let's take a look at what's on each paper. So paper 1 is what's also known as the reading paper. So there are writing skills assessed on this paper, but it's primarily focusing on looking at students' ability to show that they've understood what they've read, to demonstrate understanding of their reading. So naturally enough, there are quite a lot of comprehension questions. Okay, so we'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. So it's a 2-hour paper. It's 50% of your overall grade and it's 80 marks. Okay, so both papers are equally weighted. And it's made up of structured and extended writing questions. And there are 3 stimulus texts which they give you, which you're basing your answers on. So none of the questions ask students to come up with things from out of thin air. So they give you a text and then you have to answer questions based on the text, showing your reading of the text, your effective reading of it, and also showing your ability to write a response based on, sort of rooted in the stimulus text they've provided. Okay. Paper 2 is also 50% of the grade, 80 marks available, also 2 hours long. The emphasis here is on writing. So although paper 1 is a reading paper, it's predominantly assessed for reading. There are writing marks available too for quality of expression and so on. Paper 2, the emphasis is more on writing, although there are also reading marks available too to show your comprehension, because one of the tasks is based on a stimulus text as well. Okay, somebody's just trying to let them in. Right, so for paper 2, there's an extended writing question and a composition task. I'll be going through this in a bit more detail, but just to give you an overview, right? So paper 1, series of short questions, one longer task, and some sort of medium length tasks, if you like, and I'll go through those in a moment. And paper 2, 2 longer writing tasks, and one's a composition, so it's descriptive or narrative writing task, and the other one is a directed writing task, which is writing a speech, letter, or article. Okay, these are all assessed externally, apart from the coursework, which isn't an option, as I said, for most people. Is everybody with me? Everybody following? I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you, but hopefully it's all making sense and falling into place. And also, don't forget the syllabus is online. So all this information is taken from the syllabus, so you can read that at your leisure as well. So let's take a look at the assessment objectives. How are students assessed? We've talked about what they're asked to do in the exam. What are the assessment objectives? What are they? What do examiners, or what's the syllabus sort of looking to assess, right? So there are reading sort of abilities that candidates will be assessed on. And one of those, the first one, R1, is to demonstrate understanding of explicit meanings. That's just basically straightforward, showing that you understand straightforward facts and information that's been communicated. So locating those details and being able to state what they are. So that's sort of a level 1 response, right? So it's just basic, like state, give, identify type questions, right? Identify what the reader says about, what the writer, says about X, Y, Z. The second reading objective is to demonstrate understanding of implicit meanings and attitudes. So those are hinted at, suggested, and sort of implied meanings that you kind of have to look for, and there may be clues to, right? So that's not as straightforward. That's a little bit more challenging, a bit more demanding, but there are sort of, that's something that I think for most students comes with practice, and you develop with time and practice. Okay, so the third reading objective is to show that you can analyze, evaluate, and develop facts, ideas, and opinions using appropriate support from the text. So are you able to work out what's being said, break down what's being said, evaluate, so weighing up the ideas being expressed, and the information, the meanings that you're looking at might be, facts, it might be ideas, it might be opinions, and you should be able to locate specific examples from the text. So if you say the writer says X, Y, Z, they have an opinion which is blah, blah, you need to be able to say how you've worked that out. What examples from the text tell you that they think, recycling is a good thing, or we all need to walk more and not drive so much. What evidence from the text can you locate to support your view? Okay. And the fourth reading objective is to show that you understand how writers achieve effects using language. So how does a writer make us feel a sense of apprehension, or any kind of strong emotion, really, or imagine something? How does the writer conjure up this image in the reader's mind using particular words, through the use of particular imagery or figurative language, for example? This is one that I think students who are quite literal struggle with, but luckily this is only sort of a small component of the assessment criteria, and you can compensate for that to some extent by kind of banking marks, if you like, on the questions that test explicit understanding of explicit meanings, if that makes sense. So you can compensate for that, and there isn't a huge amount of inference or deduction and so on, as there is for like analyzing poetry, for example. If you have the poetry anthology for edXL would involve that. And you need to be able to show that you can use information for specific purposes. So sometimes, well, not sometimes, you will need to be able to adapt the information that they've provided you with for a different type of writing, a different audience, and a different purpose. So understanding how to use the information that you've been provided with and tailor it for a different kind of writing, for a different purpose and a different audience. So that genre transformation task is crucial for the longer written tasks on paper 1 and paper 2. Okay. And they have specific writing objectives that candidates are being assessed on as well. So these are all specified in the syllabus. So being able to express, to articulate, put into words what's thought, felt, and imagined. So that's essentially your ability to communicate ideas, organize and structure ideas and opinions for deliberate effect. So that's sort of at the micro level of sentences, but also structuring a piece, in terms of paragraphing, thinking about what you're going to put at the beginning, middle, and end. That's essentially what we mean by structuring, right? And planning is important for that. And using a range of vocabulary and sentence structures. So these are all things I go through in the courses, and the Key Stage 3 courses as well help build the foundation for this as well. Using register appropriate to context. So that's just knowing the level of formality that you should be using. So a letter to a friend or a family member should sound different to a letter to a bank manager or a prospective employer. So knowing that the language that you use has to be appropriate for this context and for the purpose. Spelling, punctuation, and grammar. So a bit of good news is that paper 1 no longer assesses spelling, punctuation, and grammar directly, so long as mistakes don't interfere with meaning. So you're making your meaning clear. They don't award marks for accurate spelling, punctuation, and grammar for paper 1 for the new spec anymore. So that's a good thing for those people who struggle rather with that's okay, Emily. That's okay. So that's a bit of good news. And another reason why, if these things are a struggle for your young person, waiting for 2027 might be preferable. Although remember, on the writing paper, it will still be assessed because the focus of paper 2 is writing. There's a greater emphasis on marks available for that. Right, so as I said, both papers are equally weighted, and in terms of reading and writing, those assessment objectives are equally weighted as well. So basically what that means is there are an equal number of marks available for showing that you understand what you've read, as there are for showing that you can write well. Okay, so that's important to bear in mind. What happens if a young person gets a scribe? Well, that's a whole different set of you mean in terms of the how are marks awarded for spelling, punctuation, and grammar? I'm not entirely sure about that, Jenny, because I've never actually had a situation where I've had a student who's been in that position. But that would be something maybe worth contacting the board about. But I think, in any case, predominantly the marks awarded are for content and quality of expression, and that's where the bulk of the marks, spelling and punctuation grammar form a quite small proportion of the overall marks available, if you see what I mean. So it shouldn't significantly alter in any case what the student's overall mark is. Does that make sense? Maybe worth contacting the board about that directly, though, because I'm not sure about that. Never had that situation arise. So let's talk about reading now. So these are basically those objectives that we've just looked at. These are the skills that the syllabus outlines are sort of focused on through developing students' ability, looking at different text types, looking at this is what they're aiming to sort of foster, the ability to show that you've understood what words mean literally and also sort of figuratively, being able to decode, if you like, a text and the words and phrases in them, summarizing and using material for a specific context. So there is a summary writing task. So that's a key element for that, being able to summarize and condense information, picking out key facts and details, but also being able to use it for a different purpose, developing, analyzing, and evaluating facts, ideas, and opinions. How do writers achieve their effects and influence readers? So you can see the syllabus skills that sort of designed to foster in students. It sort of aligns with the objectives that are being assessed, the assessment objectives that we've just looked at. And so essentially this is taken from the syllabus as well. So there are a range of different text types that students should be exposed to and sort of be able to confidently analyze and also write. And that includes news reports, articles, letters, speeches, journal entries, interview transcripts, and so on. So those are, you might be asked to write, any one of those for the extended response task or the directed writing task. There are 3 possible options there, as well as creative writing, so the descriptive and the narrative options on paper 2. So this is essentially what they're trying, the syllabus is outlining in terms of, what skills the course should develop in students. Okay, and similarly with writing, they have this again aligns with the assessment objective. So being able to use sentences, variety of sentences, varied vocabulary, being able to organize and convey facts, ideas, and opinions. So again, you'll see this is aligned with the assessment objectives. This is what the syllabus states. The purpose of the course is to help with developing these key skills. And these are the key sort of text types. So letter, report, article, journal, speech, interview, and summary. And also there's descriptive and narrative writing, which you need to do for section B on paper 2. Right. Now, in terms of, so that's an overview of the syllabus. Now, just to say, the assessment objectives that I've just run through are the ones that are stated in the current specification. There have been some tweaks to the wording of those assessment objectives for the new specification for exams from 2027, but no significant changes. So the skills assessed are still the same, just the wording has been altered to sort of simplify it mainly. So it's sort of more transparent, I guess, is more straightforwardly communicated. So in terms of the courses I offer, because I've had a lot of people asking me about this, and that's part of the objective of today's session, was to kind of provide you with an overview of what options I offer and also help you work out which course option might be best for you, depending on your circumstances. So there are three key things to consider. First is time frame. So when do you plan to take the exams? Are you planning to take the exams either October this year or anytime next year? So there's 2 sittings, just to make you aware. There's a sitting in May and there's an autumn sitting in October. So the current syllabus, the current specification, and the current course that I'm offering is aligned to the current specification, which is good till October 2026. In addition to that, I have just updated the course in sort of to kind of get it in alignment with the new specification, which has been launched this year. And the reason why I think there's some confusion about this is because some people think the changes have taken place already because the board have announced the launch of the syllabus. The launch of the syllabus has been announced this year because in schools, people normally cover this over 2 years. So if you think about it, you need to start teaching it this September to help students prepare for the exams in 2 years' time in 2027. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So hence, I have 2 versions of the course running at the moment, just to, make things a bit more challenging. I have a current specification course, which if you're taking exams later this year or next year is the one for you. And if you're planning to go more slowly and take your time and do the exams in 2027, I have a revamped version, if you like, it's tweaked, modified version of the same course to match the specification which has been introduced this year for students who are going to take the exams in 2027. Okay, so that's the first question. When do you want to take the exams? The second question is, do you have a preference for recorded versus live? Because I offer different options for that. I offer a recorded complete course, and some students really like that format because it means they can pace it according to their own timescale. So you can do it in 6 months or you can do it in 2 years. And that includes various different it's aligned to the textbook and the core skills, and it's sort of working from the ground up, if you like. So building the skills from scratch and moving towards taking the exams. And so that's the recorded course. So that is available there are 2 options there. So you can do it as a complete self-study course, because some people are quite, some students just need a framework and they're good to go. They just need sort of somebody to map it out for them, and they can just take it on board themselves. And then they can use the exemplars and the model responses and all the guidance notes that I've provided to help them assess their work and help prepare for the exams. The other option for those students who prefer to get feedback or have tutor marked work is the tutor marked assignments option. So those are the 2 options available for the recorded course. And then I have another course option, which is a potted intensive exam preparation course, which I run twice a year. I'm running it at the moment for students taking it in October. And you can purchase that as a set of recordings, which of a block I've done previously. So you can just work through it. I've had students buy that and do that in like 1 month or 5 weeks, because it's 10 sessions. It's normally taught over the spring term. And it's an intensive, so it doesn't assume prior knowledge, but it's a deep dive into each of the exam assessment tasks with lots of model responses and kind of walkthroughs, if you like, of how to approach the task. So you might have a lesson on writing an article. So I'll go through what an article's features are, conventions, aspects of style, and so on. And then I'll look at past paper question and the texts which you need to base your response on. And I'll show you a question that I've answered and then talk through that against the mark scheme. So it's very much geared towards understanding how to approach the assessment tasks in the exam and how to create effective responses and how to kind of gauge what examiners are looking for. What time of year is recommended to take the exam? I had the impression that the grade boundaries for the October sitting were often higher. They can be, is the answer to that, because there's just a smaller pool of people taking the exam, Lorraine. So the thing is, it's a bit hard to know because it's been a bit sort of up in the air in the last few years anyway, because of post-COVID trying to get back to pre-COVID boundaries. So the boundaries have been a bit inconsistent, let's say. But my older 2 both took this exam in October and did very well with it. So I think it depends really on what grade you're aiming at and how important that is to you. Like, sort of if you're just wanting to get a pass, then I don't think it matters that much. But if you're wanting to get top grade, I think it might be there might be marginal difference there. It's hard to say exactly because the boundaries are altered every year depending on how students perform. So they're not set in stone. So basically, to keep sort of the grade of awarding of grades consistent, when they get everybody's papers in, they work out what the boundaries should be based on students' responses. So if a lot of students did really well one year, they'll judge that the paper must have been easier. So they'll increase the boundaries and vice versa. Does that make sense? So it's a bit hard to know exactly. I think it would be, it's a question of, do you have the time? Would you prefer to wait? I think that sort of plays into it as well. So according to your own preferences, like the reason why my 2 took the exam in October, well, my middle one was affected by COVID exam cancellations and stuff, so that kind of came into it. But my older one, we were traveling in the summer, and we weren't here for the exams. We were actually living abroad, so we took the exams when we came back in the autumn. So I guess it depends on your personal circumstances as well. So how critical is it for you? to do the exams in the autumn? Do you want to stagger it according to what other subjects you're doing? I guess it depends on that sort of thing as well. And Joe says, if we choose the recorded plus the tutor marked assignments, are there any restrictions over when the assignments are supposed to be done? No, there aren't, is the short answer. So it's self-paced. So you can do it. Students have access for 2 years, and they can do it at their leisure. So they can work through the assignments at their own pace. Does that help? Because that's one of the things about it, because it's one thing I always valued as a home ed parent is having flexibility. If you're away or whatever, you're not tied to live classes, you can do things at your own pace and work through them, work through the lessons and complete assignments and get the feedback on them and gradually sort of work according to your own preferences and needs. Right. So exam prep live or recorded. So I do that live every spring and over the summer for the autumn exams, but people can buy it as a set of recordings, and some people have used it as a complete course. I didn't realize that that's what would happen when I started doing it, but people have used it as a complete course, to sort of as a learning aid. Right, my daughter has been preparing for AQA. Is it manageable for her to switch to Cambridge and pass this October? Right, so the question there is how strong your daughter is in English at this point, and also how critical it is for her to do the exams this October. I would probably consider both of those questions carefully, because if you can wait, maybe it's not just a case of whether she's ready, it's also about the pressure and the stress, because October's not that far away. So if she's okay with that, if she feels comfortable with that, if she's strong in English anyway, I think there are differences in terms of the specification, but the core skills, being able to write well is being able to write well. You know what I mean? So if she's got good skills in English anyway, then it's just a case of tailoring it to the requirements for the Cambridge tasks. Do you see what I mean? So yeah, it would depend on that, how she feels about that, and take on board, I would think personally, whether she feels comfortable with that, whether that's going to put undue stress and pressure on her. What are the maximum number of attendees for the live classes? Can recordings of those classes be accessed? Well, the number of attendees varies a lot, but it's sort of because they are all recorded, sometimes people sort of drop in and out as well, and that's okay, because it's very flexible and very informal. So if you have commitments, some people don't attend live because they have other commitments, or they have or they just prefer the recorded format. So they're all recorded, so students can watch them whenever they like, really, catch up with any they've missed. And the number of students, it sort of is typically around 20. It's around 20. The sign-ups are usually more than that, but then the number of people sort of who attend live every week sort of goes a bit up and down, if you see what I mean, because of the reasons I mentioned, if people have clashes or they're away or whatever. But typically it's in that region. No worries, Martin. I'm glad that is helpful. Right. So those are the key sort of questions: time frame, format, and the options, whether you prefer recorded or live, and what level of support you'd like in terms of whether it's important for you to get marked feedback, or whether you just want to know sort of you're on the right lines with the the model responses and the exemplars, which I have a lot of, especially for the exam preparation course, because I'm a real believer in modeling, and so modeling good writing. And initially I started writing these model responses for the benefit of my older two, because I couldn't find enough good answers out there. So I started writing them. And at some point, I'm going to write them all up into a book. But that's sort of in the distant future. Right. And the last option I wanted to mention is a new course I'm launching this autumn in response to requests from my Key Stage 3 students who really like the live format, and wanted me to continue with that for iGCSE. So that's basically a live class format. It's sort of it's a stepping stone, if you like, to the iGCSE from Key Stage 3 to the exam prep. So the last term of this live online group class will be the exam preparation course, if you see what I mean. And it's going to be taught from September and take students all the way through to May 2027. So, and although it's a live class, it's live as opposed to the recorded course. Students can watch the recordings as well. So just to make that clear, if you prefer that format, that's fine. But that's sort of building skills term by term in a similar style for those of you who are doing my Key Stage 3 classes, in a similar style and way. And the vibe of it is similar as well in terms of the level of formality. It's quite discussion based and there's a lot of interaction. Right, next, looking at the interactive course, I thought you might like some more detail on that. So I said it's a self-study course, or you can do it with the tutor marked assignments option. So what's involved? 60 plus hours of interactive tutorials that I've recorded. There are 4 blocks. So mastering skills, understanding, so that's looking at different text types, applying skills. And the last block is a set of exam preparation course recordings. So you get that thrown in as well. And then there are lots of opportunities to practice skills. So there are lots of tasks that students can attempt and model responses that I've provided so they can gauge their responses. So the idea is that's why it's interactive. You watch the bit of the video, you attempt a task, pause the video, have a go at the task, and then I talk you through a model response so you can kind of compare how you did and see if you're on the right lines. And then there are lots of supplementary resources that I provide as well, so guidance notes and additional learning materials. And it covers all the key assessment tasks. And there are past paper walkthroughs for the exam prep course block, the last of the 4 units, with lots of exemplars and mark schemes, so you can see exactly what examiners are looking for and how to produce good responses. So the reason why this course doesn't come as standard with marking is because I really believe in empowering students and parents also. So I want to try and build students and parents' understanding of the assessment tasks and the criteria and build their confidence, because once you're getting to grips with that and you understand what's required, it helps you in producing, improving your responses and producing good ones. Okay, and the cost of this self-study one is £165, and with tutor marked assignments it's £325. That's because I pride myself on the detail that I offer students in terms of the feedback, because I think that's really important for students to understand where they're doing well, where there's room for improvement, and how they can go about making those improvements to build on and strengthen their responses. The exam preparation course I've already mentioned briefly. So it's, as I said, it's a standalone course. You can do that on its own, or you can do it as a final block if you're doing the live iGCSE courses that I'm starting in September. You can attend live or watch recordings. It covers all the assessment tasks. It's quite intense. It's like an hour and a half each session for 10 weeks. And there are guidance notes, resources, exemplar responses. And the objective is to help scaffold learning and develop understanding. Past paper walkthroughs there, modeling how to produce effective answers. And as I said, I run it from January through to Easter. And then I'm in the middle of it right now. I think we're in week 7. So late June through to early September. I always allow about a month from the end of the course to the exams to review. A lot of students tell me they find it helpful to watch the recordings again and revisit some of the areas they find particularly challenging, and to practice putting into practice all those skills with past papers. And the cost of that is £98. So that is the exam prep course. And if you start the iGCSE course without the marked assignments, can you change to mark towards the end of the course? I'm not offering that option now. I did previously, but it's a lot of admin for me to do that. So it's sort of starting off with one or the other now. Sorry. Are there any recommendations for books to purchase? Well, the courses that I've designed you don't need to buy anything. There is the core textbook that you can buy, but you don't need to because all the resources are supplied. There are other additional books that you can get. But to be honest, it's not, I mean, the best thing you can do is read widely and sort of practice the skills. Okay, so there isn't any requirement to buy any additional, spend more money on additional books and resources. Okay, so the live iGCSE group class I'm starting in September, wanted to go through that a little bit. So it's live, but you can watch the recordings. So it's going to be taught over 5 terms. So starting this autumn, and then 10 sessions each term, taking students right up to May 2027. And the idea is that you build skills gradually. You can sign up at any point because lessons will be self-contained, but they'll be building on skills. So, and then you could watch previous recordings if you join part way. If you jump in part way, you can always watch the recordings from the previous blocks. It also covers all the assessment tasks. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about flipped learning because I thought long and hard about how to design this course in a way that it was affordable, but it helps students, because a big part of the cost, if you like, for courses is when I'm marking things. Okay. So what I wanted to do was design a course that helps students develop the skills, and they could gauge the quality of their responses without having to take on a huge volume of marking for me, which is not feasible, but also would necessarily add to the cost of the course, if that makes sense. So I was trying to work out a model. So flipped learning is basically, well, traditionally what happens in classes is you do a class and then the teacher sets a piece of homework and the student goes and does it. Now, with flipped learning, what you do is you give advice and information and notes in advance of the class so students can attempt the task using notes and then come to the class with their work and with their ideas, having thought about things in advance. So they're taking more ownership of their learning. And also, they're coming to the class and benefiting from the feedback that I can give them on how to approach this task, and they can see, oh yeah, that's what I did, or that's not what I did, and this is where I could do things differently. So the focus on it is sort of working on looking at responses and having group discussion. So there's going to be a variety of different activities. So it's a little bit different in that respect to the Key Stage 3 that I'm currently doing. So there will be an expectation, and it's hoped, I mean, you don't have to do it, but I think students will benefit most from it if they've done tasks outside of lessons, so they can kind of gauge their responses against the model responses and the discussion that we have in the sessions. Does that make sense? So that's I thought that would be helpful. I'm so glad, Nikki. Oh, I'm really glad it's been helpful so far. Right. So this option is available with and without marks. So to kind of cater to the students who do like marked work, I'm doing sort of two mini mocks. So there's one mini mock set at half term, which is like a half a paper, focused on the tasks that we've been looking at that half term, and another mini mock at the end of term. So hopefully if you're doing it all the way through, you'll have like a portfolio of 8 past paper tasks that you've accumulated. And you can then go straight into the exam prep with that under your belt, if you see what I mean. So it's a different model. So that's, I think it's something that I wanted to kind of talk you through, because it's a bit different to how people, it's a bit hard to explain in a message or in the Facebook group, because you kind of need to explain what, the details of how it works, right? So flipped learning is something I think it's really beneficial for students, because it helps them get to grips with what and it allows them to take some responsibility for their learning as well, right? So the cost for that, again, wanted to keep it affordable, because I really believe in trying to offer, access to high quality courses, which are, high quality and affordability don't often go together. You either have high quality and high cost, or a lower price and not as good quality. So I wanted to kind of strike a balance with that, offering high quality courses but affordably priced. So it's £45. So it's 10 weeks per term for £45, right? And £85 if you want to do the marked assignment. So it's like 2 half mocks, 2 half papers, if you like, 2 past paper tasks for that. And as I said, I pride myself on the detail and the feedback, because I think that's where students learn a lot. And now, just to mention briefly the iGCSE class, many of you have been doing these with me, so apologies to you. But basically, I've been running these for the last few years. They've been very popular. I'm really fortunate, and I feel really privileged to work with such an amazing bunch of young people. It really does. It's very touching when I've had some wonderful, amazing emails and feedback from students who've done my courses over the years. And It really does. It makes me a bit emotional, actually. So live weekly classes, you can watch the recordings as well. They're webinar style. So you join without camera, a bit like we are here. So without cameras, without mics. And I think that helps because some students feel a bit intimidated by that or feel a little bit daunted by that. They feel a little bit pressurized to contribute. So it's very relaxed, it's very laid back, and you can contribute as much or as little as you would like via the chat. And we do have a lot of lively interaction via the chat. And the idea is to lay the groundwork for moving on to iGCSE work. So remember I said way back earlier in the session that you kind of need to build skills gradually, cumulatively, incrementally over a few years. It's not something you can cram for. So this is part of that. I started doing these classes because students would come to me at 14 and they hadn't had the opportunity to have that groundwork, that grounding in all the foundation skills. So this is where they're exposed to different types of writing, they're building the key skills, and they don't even realize they're doing it because we do it in a fun way through lots of discussion, lots of interesting exchange of ideas, and they're themed blocks. So they're fun theme blocks. And students, have responded very positively to that. And so we read all the different text types that you might need to write and be prepared to, analyze for the exam tasks. So it's letters, articles, news reports, speeches, interview transcripts, journal writing, descriptive and narrative. So those classes have been, honestly, it's been a privilege to teach these classes for the last few years because I have just the most amazing students. And it's really, really lovely that some of them are now going through now to the iGCSE courses, having done all the key steps. And lady, I don't know if she's here today, actually. Are you here? Laura. Messaged me the other day and said how her son had done literally all my key stage 3 lower and upper classes, and now he's moving on to the iGCSE, and it was really lovely to see that he's enjoyed it so much. Yes, NK is the answer to your question. Can a student do the pre-iGCSE course even if later a different exam board is ultimately chosen? Yes, of course, because the focus on the pre-iGCSE, it's not specifically tied to the exams at that stage. It's just designed to build exposure to different kinds of writing and skills across English language. So those are relevant for all boards. So if you go for a different board later on, all those skills that you built up over the sessions will still be relevant and stand the student in good stead. Okay. Right. So having run through the options available, I realize I'm talking a hell of a lot and I'm running hugely over time. So if you need to go, this is what always happens with these sessions. I think, oh, I'll do it in an hour, but there's just so much to cover. Okay, so I'm going to now focus on the last sort of third of the section before the Q&A, which is looking at the specification changes. So for some of you, this may be sort of information overload, and apologies, but you can always come back to the recording. If you're not at this stage yet, that's fine. It will be there for you to as a resource to refer back to when you're at that stage. So, and for those of you who are on the cusp of this, and some of you who've signed up, you might find this helpful because it will I'm going to talk you through what the changes are and what they mean, and talk about the specifics of the tasks, how the wording and so on has been changed for certain questions. So this new syllabus, as I mentioned earlier, has been introduced this year for the first exam sitting in May 2027. The current iGCSE recorded course options are fine if you're taking exams up to October 2026. I've just launched the new recorded iGCSE course for those of you who want to take the exams in 2027. And as I mentioned, I've got the new live group class in September as well. So I've got both courses running. And one of the questions I've had asked often several times in the last couple of weeks is, if you start with one, can you switch to the other? And the answer is yes. So say you want to take the exams, you plan to take the exams next year. So you sign up for the current specification recorded course. And then you think, oh, coming closer to the time, you think, oh, actually, I think we need a bit longer. We need to take a bit more time. And I've had this happen with other students. So I think we better defer the exams to 2027. But now you're on the current course. You can switch over. It's fine. No problem. You can switch over to the new spec course, no extra charge or anything, and you can just work towards that. And as I said, the skills are the same. There's just tweaking of some of the weighting and some of the the wording of the tasks. That's the main difference. How long is the pre-iGCSE course? So they're termly. You sign up by the term. So you know, I've got 2 years worth of lower, what I call lower Key Stage 3. So that's 11 to 12-ish. And then 2 years worth of upper Key Stage 3, which is like 12 to 14-ish. I say ish because I've had students as young as 10, and I've had students who are a bit older. So it's really about ability rather than age. And I think I've had parents tell me, I'm going to show you some of the testimonials and feedback in a moment. I've had parents say they quite enjoy listening in to the session. So I think even if you're older, you can enjoy it. That's okay, Karen. That's fine, Louise. Right. So the current specification course, you can switch over, no problem. Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to clarify. And now we're going to talk about what the changes are to the specification. So key point here is there are no substantive changes. Nothing major is changing, okay? The skills assessed remain the same. So the skills that I talked about earlier on, the assessment objectives, they're all the same. The wording has been slightly changed for that, but essentially they're the same. Okay, spelling and punctuation and grammar are no longer assessed directly. So for paper 1, so as long as you have expressed ideas clearly enough that the reader can understand what you're saying, you won't be penalized. And I say penalized, it doesn't work like that exactly because they don't take off marks when you get things wrong. They give you marks if you get things right. Does that make sense? So they mark positively. So spelling, punctuation, and grammar would be correct. Spelling, punctuation, grammar would be awarded marks rather than marks taken off for incorrect spelling, punctuation, and grammar. So what that means is essentially that isn't even being assessed directly on paper 1 now. So if you've made spelling mistakes, you don't need to worry about it impacting your marks. So long as, and this is important to the caveat here, is so long as the reader can understand what you're saying, it doesn't interfere with meaning. Okay. Right. What has changed then? So the wording of the syllabus assessment criteria that I read earlier on to you, that's been changed very slightly just to make it sort of easier to understand. And some of the wording of the questions and the format of the questions has changed slightly as well. And I'll go through that with you in a moment. For those of you who are at that stage, hold on because that's going to be relevant to you. The layout, order, and organization of questions on the paper has changed slightly. So in some cases, they've just been numbered differently, or they appear at different places on the paper. And there have been some minor modification of comprehension and writer's style and writer's effects questions on paper 1. And some of the marks awarded have been sort of redistributed for the different tasks. And I'll go through that in a moment. There have been some minor changes to the longer written task on paper 1. That's the extended response task. And there's a new 5-marker question that they've introduced on paper 2, which I'm going to run through as well. So all of these things, all of these changes are reflected in the updated version of the recorded course and will be built into the live iGCSE classes that I'm starting this autumn. So a summary of the changes. So on paper 1, the comprehension question, hang on, let me just bring that all up there. So on paper 1, that's a reading paper. Remember, it's 2 hours with 80 marks. Question 1 is a set of comprehension questions. You're given a text A. You have to answer a series of like questions divided into subparts, if you like. And they're short answer questions. They test both understanding of explicit and implicit meaning. Now, in bold, you'll notice I've said same skills assessed as current specification, wording and marks altered slightly. That's all the change to that section. Question 2, summary task. So there's 2 parts to this now. There's part 2A, which is a summary, which you have to, basically condense information, key facts from a text into a shorter version of it, essentially, in your own words, in full sentences. And the summary has to be no longer than 120 words. And currently, the summary often asks candidates to look at 2 parts of the text. So, for example, a few years ago, they had a question based on how libraries, there's the text based on how libraries had been revamped and updated in recent years to cater to changing preferences and layout and design and feel and look and all of those sorts of things. And so the question for the summary was something like, how and why have libraries changed? Can you see there's two parts to that? There's the how and there's the why. So that was quite typical for the summary previously. Now there's just one aspect. So it just might be how have libraries changed if it was changed to the new format. There's also another question, which is a new task which has been introduced as part of question 2, which is 5 marks, which is asking candidates to assess the writer's attitude to something. So I'm going to have a look at all of these in a bit more detail in a moment. And for question 3 on paper 1, short answer questions and a language task. This is similar to the what's known as the writer style questions at the moment on paper 1. Is largely unchanged. The skills assessed are the same. The wording and the mark allocation has been slightly adjusted. And for question 3D, that's the writer's effects. This is the one where you have to, this is a good thing to point out for that lady who contacted me asking me which year, whether she should go for the exam next year, or 2027. If your child struggles with drawing inferences, and if they find that tricky, and they're quite literal, then this is a good change for them, because previously you had to analyze 6 examples of language use, so figurative language or imagery. And now you only have to analyze 3, and it doesn't specifically ask you to analyze imagery. So if that's something that's a bit difficult for you, that you find a bit difficult or you struggle with, this is actually a beneficial change here. And for question 4, so the good news is the changes are beneficial, I think, overall. And so for question 4, which is the longer extended response task, the skills assessed are the same. The wording and the marks available and the weighting has been altered slightly. The marks available have been reduced from 25 to 20. There's 10 for content and 10 for quality of writing. Previously, it was 15 marks for content and 10 for quality of writing. And the way that they ask students to kind of include the marks for content, I think, is a positive change for students as well. So those are all, I think, my assessment of it is that it's the changes being introduced advantageous to students and benefit them. And so that might be a factor that plays into your decision about whether or not to take the exams next year or the year after. So a closer look at the assessment task. So we looked at the comprehension question. So the skills assessed are the same, the style and format is the same. There are minor changes to the wording and the marks available. They're mainly, just to give you a sense of what you're being asked, they're mainly 1 marker questions which use the command words identify, which is simply state what the text is saying about X, Y, Z. And 2 marker questions using the command word explain. So that's a sort of level up question. You need to demonstrate a deeper level of understanding and comprehension. You need to be able to locate and identify and explain both explicit and implicit meanings. And then there are 3 3-mark questions which require candidates to explain, so go into a bit more depth and detail. So they're the most challenging questions on this part of the paper. And so that's your first part. And for question 2A and 2B, the summary is basically the same. The numbering of it's changed. So it was 1F previously, now it's 2A. So not a huge change, obviously. The instructions are the same. You're not to write in note form, and you need to write in full sentences. The 120 marks, 120 words, sorry, maximum of 15 marks available here. And that's the same as it is at present. So 10 marks for content. So that's ideas, points that you're making taken from the passage that you're writing about, that you're basing your summary on, and 5 marks for quality of writing there. And for the writer's attitudes, that's a new question where you need to say what the writer thinks, essentially. And then you need to use some details from the passage to say, this is why I think the writer thinks this, how did you reach this conclusion? And so you need to support your response with details taken from the passage. And then writer's style, question 3A and 3B, that's really largely the same as it is at the moment. Not a lot of difference. You basically, you call it a kind of find the synonym question, where so they give you a word and they'll say find a word that means the same as this in the passage. So I don't know, let me think of an example. The woman walked wearily. find a word in the passage that means the same as walked wearily, and it might be trudged you're looking for, something like that. So you get the idea. So it's a find the synonym type question and explain the meaning of this word type question as well. So just to kind of give you an idea of what's involved with that. The writer's style. So you need to take one example from a paragraph that's been given to you and explain the writer's thoughts and feelings using your own words. So you basically have to unpack the meaning and try to paraphrase and provide some detail there on how, what the writer's feelings are, and explain what it hints at or suggests about the writer's feeling, what this chosen word or phrase is telling you. And then for the writer's effects, I already mentioned that these changes I think are positive because now you only have to write 200 to 250 words for the new spec, that is, as opposed to the current spec where you're asked to write 200 to 300. You only need to use 3 examples as opposed to 6 here. And you don't need to specifically include any words or phrases linked to imagery. You just have to analyze the writer's use of language. So you're looking for like striking, unusual or memorable language, and you're commenting on the effect it has and how it's used. So that's similar to the current specification as well. And then the extended response task, which carries the most marks on paper 1 of any single task. And that's 20 marks now instead of 25. So the marks have been sort of slightly adjusted, but essentially what you're being asked to do is the same. So you need to basically look for content marks and quality of writing. You need to take on the role of a character, if you like, and use information in the passage that you're presented and express them in your own words, writing in a particular genre for a particular audience. So you might be given an article and be asked to write a letter to a friend based on some of the information in the article, or you might be asked to write a journal transcript based on an interview between 2 people, right? Something like that. So you're given one kind of writing and you need to take ideas from it, put them in your own words and turn it into a different kind of writing for a different audience. Hopefully that is in a nutshell what you need to do. And now paper 2. So briefly in the last few minutes now, I know I'm running hugely over, but it's just so much that I wanted to cover with you today. So for paper 2, the tasks are the same. They've introduced, the main difference is they've introduced a new 5-mark question for what's known as the directed writing task, which is the first task on paper 2. And the longer written task is 35 marks. So the number of words that the candidate has to read, the stimulus texts are shorter, essentially. And the criteria for the marking has been updated. So the first part is basically like a kind of warm-up for the question 1A is like a warm-up for question 1B. And question 1B is where you're given 2 different texts, usually presenting contrasting views on a topic. And then you need to write either a speech, letter, or article using the ideas presented in both those texts in your own words. So, for example, let me think of one from a past paper question. You might be asked about the advantages and disadvantages of setting New Year's resolutions. So there's one passage you're given which suggests it's a good thing, and the other one which suggests there's some reservations, there's some issues or some concerns regarding setting resolutions, New Year's resolutions. And you have to basically use those ideas, sort of integrate them into a speech, let's say, for young people about the benefits of setting yourself goals or something like that, and using the ideas in both the passages and then evaluating them. So thinking about, are there any ways of thinking about this, or are there any limitations to this argument? So that's the idea in a nutshell, right? There's quite a lot I could go into with that, but I've done a separate webinar on that, so you can have a look at that. So this is really just to highlight what the changes are. So there's a warm-up question, if you like, for the first part of section A. And then you write your detailed longer response there. And the second part of paper 2 is a composition task. So there's 2 descriptive and 2 narrative titles. You pick one, and this is I think this is the only kind of literary sort of task, I suppose, apart from the writer's effect, which has been sort of less challenging now, I think, with the new spec, because you don't have to refer to kind of imagery, which is a requirement that they have in the current specification. So hopefully that's clarified some of the concerns people may have had about. I'm just going to, this is just a bit more detail on the tasks for paper 2. So in the first, first task, I said, as a warm up for the directed writing task, you need to evaluate the ideas presented in the text and provide some details to support your view. So what is the writer saying in the text? And what makes you think that, essentially? What examples or evidence can you see in the text which tell you that the writer thinks that keeping resolutions are a good idea or not? And then you write your more detailed response on that. So you need to write a letter, speech, or article, and you're given these 2 texts, and you need to be able to analyze, identify first, analyze and evaluate the ideas, and then match it to what a speech looks like, what a letter looks like, what an article looks like, essentially. Okay, so does anybody have any questions? I just wanted to share with you, I was looking through some of the testimonials, as I got a bit emotional earlier on, because I do get some wonderful, really, really heartwarming messages. These are just a selection. I've got pages and pages and pages, like I've got a document of them where I keep all of them and treasure them and read them. Because it's just so rewarding to hear from parents and students who've enjoyed the lessons and learned so much. And yeah, no, you're welcome, Louise. I'm glad it was helpful to you. Some feedback for you here from other parents, and just sort of, just wanted to express my thanks to all of, those of you who've attended my sessions or are attending my sessions. And yeah, just an opportunity now for you guys to ask me any questions that you may have. We've had questions throughout, and hopefully I've answered, the questions. I think I've answered all the questions, checking out to make sure I haven't missed anybody's questions. Yeah, no, I think we're good. Does anybody have any points, comments, questions that they'd like to share? And apologies for running half an hour over, because I thought it was a bit too ambitious to cover this in an hour, but that's what I'd scheduled for it, and I thought, well, if it takes a bit longer, it does. But that's how these things usually go. Thank you for joining me, guys. I hope you found it helpful. My daughter is a very enthusiastic story writer. I am an author. Wonderful. Which probably helps. Would you say the spec is the best suited to her creative skills? Well, I think it does give scope for that, because I think actually for the paper 2 composition task is quite challenging. That's the lesson I had this morning with my iGCSE students preparing for the autumn exams. We were looking at narrative writing, and I think actually it's one of the most challenging tasks to be able to write an effective short story. So I think that's something that she could hone there through that, and descriptive writing obviously as well. That it's the craft of writing, isn't it, essentially? You take a look at the other specifications as well, but I think it's a really good one for I mean, I'm assuming she probably wants to take A-level English or English literature, and is she doing literature as well? That might be helpful to her as well to complement. But yeah, take a look, and I think that does give you an opportunity for that. Excellent. She's taking English literature as well. You're welcome, Jo. Thank you, Kate. Thank you for joining. And it's been lovely to have you guys join me. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon and the rest of the day, whatever you're up to, and a lovely summer, what's left of it. I shall see you soon. Thank you so much. You're welcome. Thank you, Lorraine. Charlotte and I are looking, and you, I'm glad you're attending too, Lorraine. Charlotte and I are looking forward to the new iGCSE course. She absolutely loved the Key Stage 3 sessions. We are probably going to sit in 2028 though. No, that's fine. The syllabus, by the way, the new one that they've just introduced is going to run through till 2029, I think. So you'll be good. Thank you so much, Lorraine, for that. That's made my day. Thank you, guys. Take care. Bye.